Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be starting in a couple minutes. We're just letting some other people kind of flood in, so sit tight. I think we'll just wait a few more minutes, let some more people flood in. I know it's the top of the hour here, so welcome to the GrayHair webinar for February. Address quality is a game changer for large enterprises. We will, we hopefully will have some more people join, and then we can get started. There, they're coming. They're coming in now. Okay, great. We will get started. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for joining the GrayHair webinar. Today's webinar is called Address Data Quality is a Game Changer for Large Enterprises. We definitely appreciate your time. I'm going to go through just the welcome and the logistics. Just to let you know, I'm sure you've heard of this 1,000 times. Webinar is being recorded. Everybody's lines will be muted. We will be having 2 short poll questions that will pop up in your chat boxes, so keep an eye out for them. We'll alert you when they do happen. Also, any questions, please submit them for the chat, and I will be here kind of to monitor them and give you an idea of when we can answer them, how we're going to answer them, and hopefully we'll do it towards the end of the presentation. And of course, after the presentation, you'll get a recording, and then after that, hopefully you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint. I'll be sending that out, I believe, on Friday, so look for that as well. So let's go into the details. Today's discussion, we're going to be talking about address hygiene versus address data quality. What's the difference? We're really going to key up on that target on why address data quality is the game changer for large enterprises. And we're going to talk in detail about, what are the best practices that drives the best results. And I think I'm going to introduce the 2 people who can definitely help you out with that. First, I'm going to let Everett introduce himself. And then we can introduce Adam shortly after that. So Everett, I'm going to turn it over to you. So go ahead.
Thanks, Bobby. Hi, my name's Everette Mills, and as the title says, I'm the Director of Technical Product Management here at GrayHair Software. And what that means is I spend my day working as a bridge between our sales and marketing teams and our client operations team and our technical team to find solutions for our customers that works. That involves things from designing new features in our products to working on custom solutions and interfacing with the USPS on behalf of our customers. And I work side by side with Adam on many of our solutions, and I'll let Adam introduce himself.
Thanks, Everett. So my name is Adam Collinson. I'm the Director of Research and Development for GrayHair Software. My background is programming, starting off in the address quality tools and operations. These days, my focus is around the data. What data is available and how can it be utilized by our clients, not only to help their mailing operations, but really to address a lot of their business operations. And so that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is not just what is available and what happens and is going on and available around address hygiene, but really have a bigger discussion around address data quality and what that means. So first thing we want to do, let's kind of introduce the topic. So as we mentioned, there's address hygiene and there's address data quality. Now, address hygiene, if you've been to any postal event, you've seen sessions on address hygiene. Address hygiene is focused on, is this address a correct address? Is it complete? And is it current for the existing location where the person resides? So the focus is related to basically postal and being able to get postage discounts, qualifying for the various layers. Now, address data quality is going one step further. This is where we're looking at the address and the nature and characteristics of the address to understand, is this the address I need for what I want to do with this particular relationship with my client? Is this the right address that I need to use to ship something to them, to send them a bill, to send them a marketing piece? But also, is this the right address I'm allowed to use because of other regulations beyond postal? There are regulations in all kinds of industries these days, in healthcare, in finance, in telco. They all have regulations that restrict what types of addresses can be used in certain situations. And so that's the key, is you got to be able to identify, okay, not only is this a good address, but is it one of the ones where I have to do something different just to meet other industry regulations in whatever business I'm doing. But it also is a thing where now people are realizing there's also addresses that have various unusual, if you will, restrictions as to how you need and what you need to do in order to maintain the address, in order to maintain the relationship with a particular client. I know when we talk to a lot of people, they'll kind of go, well, this is interesting, but how big of an impact really is it? So I'm a data guy, so that's why I wanted to show you some numbers. So what I actually did in preparation for this call, I just went to some recent processing we did for some of our clients that are using the more advanced address quality and data sources that we make available. So these are already basically some of our best practices mailers. And I pulled the latest runs and latest data just to see what we've got. And so this is based on over 7 million records. And in address hygiene, you can see, wow, this looks really good. 99.8% fully qualified for the maximum level of postage discounts, a little bit qualified for pre-sort, and only 0.17% got no postage discount. Now, when you kind of think about that to industry averages, the general rule is, best practices is 98% and up qualifies for full postage discounts. So if you're over 99%, you're in the best of best practices ranges. So this is kind of already showing you that from an address hygiene perspective, there's already been a lot of effort to really get these lists cleaned up, make them solid. But this also kind of gives you a target as to kind of compare against. It's like, what the industry is. Average, best practices is 98%. Average is, 96 to 97%. But over 99% is achievable. Now, that's the first part, address hygiene. Great, that's what I get for my discounts. Now, address data quality. What else do we know about these addresses? It's like, well, wait a minute, if 99% were full postage, but right off the bat, I see that 1.73% are deficient, have some sort of deficiency in the address that could result in that mail piece not being deliverable, or could result in not being able to detect other issues about that person or that address. And in fact, through our advanced capabilities, we already know that 1.71% we know are going to be undeliverable right off the bat. Even though you qualify for discounts, these pieces will not be delivered. It's going to be undeliverable mail. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but I did want to point out a couple other ones. About midway down, you see just over 6% are non-physical addresses. This has been a characteristic that's gotten a lot of attention the last couple of years. Non-physical address means this is an address where the person receives mail, but it is not where they live. And this impacts financial institutions, telco, healthcare, anything where there's regulations associated where you need to know where the person resides, either for legal enforcement reasons, in order to establish proper rates, proper tax rates. You need to know when an address is a non-physical addresses versus getting their actual address. So these were ones where you would identify these and go, okay, if you're one of these industries, great, thank you for giving me your mailing address. Can you please also give me your physical address? So it keys off, letting you know these are the ones that I need to ask for additional data. And right below that, at 5.73%, are what I categorize as high risk level addresses. These are ones where there's a higher than usual chance that either the mail piece won't get delivered correctly, i.e. might end up getting delivered to the wrong address, or where there's a third party involved in delivering the mail piece, meaning the USPS hands it to someone else who then makes final delivery to where the recipient will pick it up. So you've got a third party involved that could intercept, potentially steal a particular communication. So these are ones where, if you're sending out a new credit card, things like that, you might want to flag these and go, you know what, let's do a little extra step validating before activating the card. So this is just some of the information. And one of the key other things with this data is to remember, this is the high level numbers. So we know that 6% are non-physical addresses. Great. You look into that, you go, well, 2% are this reason, and 0.5% is this other reason. There's several subcategories. And different mailers in different industries will care and be concerned about different ones. Now, if you are also, and this is also again kind of an average, when I've looked at this for various clients, ones that are more focused on individuals, this number is a little lower. Ones who are engaged where a lot of their clients are other businesses, I've actually seen ones where non-physical addresses constituted over 15% of the addresses in their database. So the numbers are available to make much smarter decisions, not only about mail, are these deficient addresses known undeliverable mail messages, but also to make better decisions about your business relationship. And so this can be used to garner savings, including offsetting increasing costs. So one of the next things I want to show you is, one of the changes that are happening right now, you just all encountered it, is the fact that, postage rates change every year. And so we had our normal rate change on January 24th. But if you've been following, the discussions and what all is happening in the industry, you know that the USPS has authority to potentially initiate an additional rate change. At this point, generally it's not set yes or no, but it is considered likely that it will happen later in the year. The exact size, timing is probably going to be mid-year. The exact amount is currently unknown. But with that, we wanted to actually ask our first poll question related to this. Have you budgeted for another rate increase? So we'll leave this poll open for a moment. See answers coming in. And so one of the reasons we look at rates as kind of an interesting factor, especially when you look at the impact it has not only on mailing operations and your own businesses and budgets. It's an interesting thing I've always looked at. The current amount of undeliverable mail that is out there, if you actually look at the cost impact just to the Postal Service, it's the equivalent of a rate increase. So it's kind of a fun thing of, if we could eliminate all undeliverable mail, basically it would be telling the USPS, hey, you actually don't need to do a rate case this entire year. The impact to the mailing industry is obviously a lot larger. Now this year, we've also had a lot of additional changes and impacts, impacting the Postal Service, impacting all of our lives. Obviously, COVID is the first one. I'm going to hand it over to Everett to talk about some of the impacts COVID has had.
Thanks, Adam. And I think that's a great point that you bring up about the cost impact of the rate cases and regulatory changes, and we'll explore some of that a little bit further down in our presentation. And I do want to kind of share at a high level around some of the impacts that COVID and then the response and changes to the way businesses operate due to COVID and just some general trends. We know there's a general trend in the reduction in first-class mail volume and in the marketing mail volume, but there's been a dramatic increase in package volume for the post office. And as Adam pointed out earlier in the presentation, different types of addresses have different impacts. An address that's excellent for delivery of a mail piece may not be a great result for packages, and vice versa. But as we talk about the impacts to the post office, and what we've seen recently is some dramatic slowdowns in mail delivery, and it's erratic. The impact to some customers where you live has been significantly varied. If you lived in Philadelphia or Cleveland or Chicago, you might see 14 to 21 day delays. If you live in Dallas, maybe it's a 1 or 2 day delay. And that kind of uncertainty has, rattled the mailing industry a little bit, but it also has some real impacts on your customers. And as we go through this, having addresses that are complete, correct, and current has an impact on delivery. When you start to deal with the uncertainties of the COVID epidemic and the impacts on staffing, mail pieces that may have historically reached your customer through delivery force knowledge, or basically the experience of the mail carrier, knowing that John Smith lives at apartment 14, those types of changes can take a mail piece that's been successfully delivered for the last 5, 10, 15 years and turn it into a mail piece that comes back to you or doesn't reach your customer, and can have some significant impacts on your customer relationships and your ability to continue to do business with them. And as we talk about that, we're going to have some new regulatory forces that are coming into play. And I'm going to turn over to Adam to talk a little bit about CAS Cycle O.
So CAS Cycle O, for those that have not heard about what a CAS Cycle is, well, first off, CAS is the Coding Accuracy Support System. It's the programs that take your addresses and standardizes it to USPS standards, which then enables the address to then be checked for change of address, all these other address characteristics. Now, back when I started, CAS cycles actually changed every year, but over time, as there was less and less needing to get changed, because this is like a constant improvement. This CAS cycle started happening less and less often because there wasn't enough changes needed to justify an entire CAS cycle. Well, now there's been enough changes, but as the effect is that we haven't had a CAS cycle in over a decade. So this is going to present a couple of interesting challenges. First off, a lot of the people that were around in your company when the last CAS change happened aren't there anymore. So there's a bit of a ramp up to kind of re-educate yourselves, a lot of businesses, with, all right, what does it mean when I want to put in a new CAS engine? Now, the other thing with this, because it's 10 years, there's a significant number of changes coming with this CAS cycle. Now, when I say changes, the main part is actually new and additional data that's becoming available. So in discussions with the post office in designing CAS Cycle O, it could be dropped in pretty much as is, and you can keep running the way you've been. But if you don't take advantage and start utilizing the new data, besides seeing some impacts, positive, negatives, as far as coding, you're also going to see that you're no longer at best practices. Basically, the goalpost for reaching best practices is moving with CAS Cycle O. You can make a lot more intelligent decisions. Now, does that mean you have to wait for CAS Cycle O to come out? No. A lot of the data can be identified today, so that you could take actions today to account for changes that are coming in the future. And the thing is, you will actually benefit, the businesses and your mailing operations will actually benefit today before CAS cycle comes out. And then when CAS Cycle O comes out, you're not going to see much of it. You won't see as big of a change in your operations. So there's value to dealing with that right now and planning for it, especially planning for it. The current CAS Cycle O is scheduled to become effective August of 2022. That's when everyone will have to transition to it. And so based on that, we're actually going to do our second poll question, which is, have you budgeted already for CAS Cycle O implementation and the regulatory impact that's going to have on your business? So again, it's the software is not fully available. It should become available beginning of next year as far as to the end users. And then it will be required that everyone has switched to Cycle O as of August 2022. Some of the changes, just one that I love pointing out is there are a set of addresses today, and this kind of ties back to what I was talking about with knowing the data quality. There are addresses today that fully CAS code, fully validate, qualify for postage discounts, and yet they're undeliverable. So today, well, great, you can mail the piece and get your discounts. It's still a wasted mail piece. In the future with Cycle O, those pieces will no longer qualify for postage discounts. So now it's a complete waste. But if you can identify those today, and you can, the data is available, we can identify these records. You can go ahead and identify these and go, wait a minute, these are ones I should not be mailing to. And in fact, these are the ones that I need to reach out to the clients and ask them, please provide your mailing address. So you can get that benefit today. So then when Cycle O comes into play and it's a requirement, it's not really going to impact you. So Everett, tell us more of why you need to act now.
Well, I think you've laid a pretty good case, Adam, for the impacts that are coming down the road, whether it's CAS Cycle O or the rate case. But as we move forward, we talked about data, and I'm a data person as well. And the first thing you need to really understand why you need to act now is to understand where you are today. And as we go into that, and Bobby, if we could go to the next slide, please. There's key data points in your company that you're going to need to be able to understand exactly what is happening. And those data points include things like ACS and return mail, understanding your customer response, researching possibly with your call center or other agents. If you are like an insurance company that has agents that are out in the field or independent agents, you may need to work with them as well. And all this comes together to really ask the question, are you actively managing your addresses? Do you understand how many of your mail pieces reach a customer at the right time and the right situation? And as they move forward, you need to know your numbers. If you're not actively managing your addressing numbers, then you don't know if you have a problem. And if you don't have those numbers, there's a number of different things you can do to obtain them. And so we talked about, right? Look at undeliverable mail. It could be a return mail center. And just because it's not physically in front of you, you may have a return mail center that's in another state or another location and those types of things. And then we start to talk about, as you're managing those numbers, what are you trying to achieve? And we have some ballparks around what industry norms look like, and then what targets can be done with some good work. And as we start to talk about this, and kind of with the previous comments, I like to think about it of a kid cleaning their room. Just because they've picked up their clothes and put them in the closet, their dirty clothes off the floor, doesn't mean that the clothes are clean and it's cleaned up. My son is a classic example, says, Dad, I cleaned my room. Yeah, it looks great on the outside, but when you go dig into the data, opening the closet, you find out that, hey, maybe there's 2, 3, 4% of your mail isn't reaching your customers without having some extra work done, or just isn't reaching them at all. And you have to understand that there are best-in-class results, and those vary by the type of mail and the work you're doing. When you're looking at marketing to consumers, we see anywhere between 5 and 10% if you just run CAS and NCOA off of a random list and then mail it out there. If you're actively managing your list using multiple different methods, many of our customers are able to achieve under 2%. For operational or transactional mail, you can see on average it's 2 to 4%, and we can, working with our customers, get them under 1%. And what you start to see is that there's huge savings that can be driven off of some fairly straightforward work that you can do to implement process improvements. When you start to look at the numbers, we're talking several $1 million in savings for a large mailer. And it can be even more dramatic, especially on the marketing side. You can drive the response rates. You can mail less and have the same response rate, or mail just a little bit more to better targeted addresses and have significantly more responses and really drive the return on investment from your activities. And one of the reasons we like to point out the savings is many times some of these regulatory activities and the rate cases, it seems like there's just more cost, there's more cost, there's more cost. And by doing some of these and taking advantage of the regulatory situation, you can also drive savings within your organization. Besides just doing the bare minimum from a regulatory perspective, you have the opportunity to do some really dramatic things that drive your business forward. Yes, they meet the regulatory deadlines and the regulatory requirements, but they move your business forward and drive savings and hopefully a return on investment. And that's where we talk about really leveraging the data, the value of the right data at the right time is more than just the savings from the postage. And that's where we start to talk about some best practices and how you can use the regulatory pushes that are coming and use them to drive savings farther into your business. You can help your company identify and intercept fraudulent activity. And this is where it's beyond just your company. It's the experience for your customer. You can identify moves or fraudulent activity around those moves for your customer and leverage things like seeing a customer that's been in one place for a long time. If you see a change of address come in through various sources or through another mail piece, you can reach out to them and verify whether it's by phone, text message, email, or if they have a local agent, you can have them reach out to understand what's happening. And you can identify that fraudulent activity if it's occurring, but then you can talk to improving your customer experience. So that may be, oh, you're moving into a new house. Do you need to change your insurance products? Or do you need a credit card or a bridge loan? Or something changing in your life because of your move that's happening there. And you can see things that happen within a household. Maybe the parents are a customer of yours, and you can see a child move out of the house or some other situations that changes. Those type of improved customer experiences can really make a relationship and a connection with your customer. Another example that you might see is somebody that's receiving, whether it's a membership card or some sort of check, if they have, or a credit card in the mail, if they receive emails that say, your check's on the way, your check will be in your house in 2 days, your check is in your mailbox, go check on your check or your credit card. That can improve the customer satisfaction and reduce call center volumes with people calling saying, where's my credit card? Where's my check? Where's my membership card? And in driving those savings, you're also improving the customer satisfaction. And then using that same approach and the same processes, you start to ensure that you have good quality responses for your campaigns. When you're reaching the right address with the right name, it's deliverable. You remove uncertainty around delivery timeframes. You can time multi-channel marketing with different activities so that a customer is receiving their mail piece with their name on it and also receiving targeted marketing, whether it's digital, radio, television, etc., to improve your response rates. All of that data quality can drive a significant business impact. And as we start to talk about the data quality best practices, it's not just CAS and NCOA and CAS Cycle O. It's not just doing address verification at one point. It's really about a continuous feedback loop. When the addresses come into your system, best practices is to validate them right there. And that eliminates a number of things that just typos and minor discrepancies that don't seem like a significant issue at first, but can become a real issue when you're trying to reach your customer at the end of the day. Things like a customer gives their address as 123 Main Street. Well, that address is completely valid. 123 Main Street exists. It just happens to be a 100-unit apartment complex. And when your agent or app that's taking in that information types that address in, if they can say, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, can you give us your apartment number? That'll prevent issues from even beginning in your system. And then some of your customers may choose to receive their statements or communications electronically, so you're not reaching out to them on a regular basis through the mail. But at the time of mailing, you have to send them a new card, a check, some sort of physical item, a privacy notice, whatever it may be. And this is where your monthly database maintenance is critical, using CAS and NCOA and then proprietary address databases to ensure you catch moves. Some customers you might not reach out to with a mail piece for 2, even 3 years, especially if they've chosen to receive all their communication electronically. And if you're not actively maintaining that database, you may lose sight of that customer as you're mailing. And then as you move into just-in-time, as close to mailing as possible, again, take advantage of the CAS NCOA, proprietary address databases, and if you have some sort of suppression or custom management rules around that, those can drive additional value, remove mail pieces that, while, as Adam talked about, may be completely valid from a postal perspective, unlikely to be effective as a tool to reach your customer. And then it's always going to be customers that are changing, they're in flight, somebody just sold their house, they're changing addresses, they're moving apartments. There is going to be changes and challenges in your address population. We try to minimize that as much as we can, but as you go to that, you're going to get feedback from the USPS as it happens. And you can see that feedback in mail tracking and ACS, address change service, and then in secure destruction. And taking the feedback from that process and not just view it as this is how we make sure our mail gets there, or we're doing ACS because it's required and we're getting the data and putting it in a cabinet somewhere, or the proverbial digital trash bin. What you want to do is take the feedback elements and view them as events that are occurring against your customer and find out, did it reach my customer in a timely manner? Did it reach my customer at all? Did it reach my customer at the address that I had on for them, or did it go to a new location? Did something abnormal happen that maybe would have a negative customer impact? And use all of those to make informed decisions, and different decisions depending on the type of customer they are, the relationship you have with them, and the way you manage them. And a really good example is the way GrayHair has worked with Aflac, and Adam has spent some a whole I would say months, but it might be years of your life working on this. So why don't you share a little bit more about the work that you've done with Aflac?
Yeah, Aflac is a good example because they're utilizing all the tools, all the data, and definitely have the mindset also of continuous improvement. So when we first got involved with them, they were already seeing that their delivery rate was at 97.5%. So a higher percentage than that was qualifying for discounts, and so only about 2.5% was not getting delivered, which put them already in best practices range. But that wasn't good enough for them. They wanted to be even better. They wanted to be at the best of best practices. So right off the bat, we started implementing processing on their entire databases every 60 days. They saw initially a big bump in standardizations of addresses because we kind of analyzed their data and went, well, based on the way your addresses are formatted, here's how we want to actually set up your jobs. And that's because, no two customers are the same. The data is going to be different. So setting up the jobs properly to match the data is first thing that's critical. Now, getting that in and getting that corrected then started to allow us to see, well, what's some of the other information and data about these addresses, and especially the ones that are undeliverable and or pieces that are getting returned. Start identifying what are some of these issues and where are there opportunities to make improvements. So today, their delivery rate has already increased to 98.5%, and obviously their coding rates on what's being mailed is even higher. But we're not done. We know there's still additional opportunities, additional value, and so we've got the database runs happening. We absolutely have just in time going on as well, because they're getting new records all the time, and they're getting new feeds from their subclients that might actually, accidentally overwrite corrections back to bad addresses. So just-in-time processing catches and reapplies the updates, but it's also capturing all the very latest information to apply right at the time of mailing. A lot of the focus recently has been on the tool around data entry. And it's not just identifying, hey, this address didn't code, or hey, this address says, hey, please add an apartment number on. It's actually getting more refined. They're working on the, hey, yeah, this address is good or bad. Here's the element that seems to be a problem, but also producing alerts. Hey, this is an address with this unique characteristic. Please make sure to ask for additional information. For example, the physical versus non-physical address. Great, this is an address where the person resides, but it is not an address that receives mail. Please also ask for a mailing address. Or, hey, this is great. This is their physical address, but if the need at this part in the operation is that you need the physical address where they reside, please ask for the other address information. All this leads to now not only going to improve better address quality, even further in delivery rates, but also will help us allow and establish better relationship with their clients to make sure that they're getting everything they need at the right addresses in full compliance. And I was going to share some additional numbers. They're not in a slide. The USPS every year posts the latest UAA, their undeliverable as address data information from what they see. And the numbers are interesting. The good news number is on marketing mail. The rate of undeliverable marketing mail has declined, but that kind of makes sense. People are doing the same thing. They're utilizing the data to identify the pieces that are undeliverable or problematic and not mailing to those, instead replacing those pieces with known good deliverable addresses. And in marketing mail, they have a little bit more flexibility to be able to do that, to suppress pieces. First class mail, a lot of those pieces are more regulated, and unfortunately that's the bad news. The rate of undeliverable first class mail has increased. Not only has it increased as a percentage of the mail volume that's going out, but for the last several years, the flat out raw number of undeliverable mail pieces has increased. As we all know, total mail volume is down. So that is really not a good thing. Currently, a little over 4% is undeliverable as addressed for first class mail. Now, a good portion of that is because of change of addresses. So the USPS can handle forwarding the piece, but that means that piece is going to require additional handling, additional processing, and we'll see delays in delivery. As far as the pieces of first class mail that aren't delivered at all, it's currently now up to 2.8%. So think about that. That's nearly 3 out of every 100 checks that aren't getting received. 3 out of every 100 bills you're sending that aren't being received. Basically 3 out of 100 customer relationship and communications that aren't reaching their recipients and are just a waste. So there's an opportunity to really go after that. And so that's the example we wanted to share. What do we have next? I'm trying to remember. I think that's the end. We're ready for questions. I don't know. We've had
it
a
is
chat.
question time, Adam. Yep, it is question time, Adam and Everett. Thank you very much for that. Let's get to it. I do have some questions here. So we use CAS and NCOA, but can you explain, and this is 2 questions, looks like, your just-in-time, can you explain just-in-time again? That's the
Sure.
first half of this question. So can you explain just-in-time and what we mean by that?
The key thing for just-in-time is if you think about the postal regulations for qualifying for discounts, it's all you have to run CAS and some change of address process within a certain amount of time frame prior to the mailing. For the change of address, it's within 95 days prior to the mailing. So that's why, like with Aflac, we run the databases every 2 months. We run everything through. So we're good as far as meeting the qualifications. But with just in time, the idea is you want to also run as close as possible to the time of mailing so that you're getting the very latest information. And that will facilitate not only finding additional changes of address, which rough average is 0.25% of your list is moving every week. So if you haven't run move update or check move update in over a month, 1% of your list is out of date. If it's a marketing mailing, that means 1% is just going straight in the trash. Additionally, information about the routing and final coding of addresses is also changing at several 100,000 changes a month. So again, running just in time means you're running with the very latest information, getting that extra benefit to reduce the amount of what you're putting in the mail that is essentially wasted. So that's the purpose of just in time.
And Adam, how often are the CAS and NCOA databases being updated, just so folks understand what's happening?
Multiple levels. CAS main database is updated monthly. However, there is an additional weekly update for related to some new addresses that just were getting added in between the monthly updates. For NCOA Link, there is a primary update that occurs once a week, but there are also daily updates, again, for impacting changes that are occurring between the weekly updates.
And that's why it's so important, especially if you're buying like a marketing list. You might buy a marketing list 90 days before the campaign takes place, which the list may be perfectly clean at 90 days, prior to mailing. But if you take that list, hold on to it for 90 days or even 30 days before you mail, you can have a significant number of mail pieces that are undeliverable simply because you didn't run your CAS and NCOA activities right before it was time to print and mail.
So I know that addressed part one of the question. What was part two? Did we cover
Part
that?
two is if you could give a brief description of what we mean by our proprietary data.
Proprietary data is it's additional information that we have regarding the results of mail pieces that have been sent out and whether they were deliverable or not. We obviously have a lot of our customers actually give us the okay to utilize and supply us additional information regarding how mail pieces to certain individuals at specific addresses have performed in the past. Were they deliverable? Were they not deliverable? If they weren't deliverable, for what reasons? And utilize that information to go, okay, this address is perfectly good, but apparently this person is not there and maybe hasn't been for a long time. So
Yeah.
it's.
Oh, and I was just going to chime in there, Adam, that it starts to deal with some complex situations where a person maybe is a part-time resident of a particular address or location. Maybe they're a snowbird. Maybe they've got a temporary job assignment. CAS and NCOA don't handle those situations as well. And you also run into situations where maybe a family move was inadvertently filed and change of address. And using proprietary data, you have a better chance of understanding, was that the right move? Did it occur? Or if somebody moved and did not provide an NCOA change of address, understanding where they may have moved to or what happened with that person. And it's leveraging all those different factors that can make a real difference and driving that rate down below the industry norms and driving it into the best practices range.
And some of the key is there's certain issues with addresses and or mailing to a certain addresses that you can only learn after actually trying to mail. It's not available in any pre-mailing database currently provided by the Postal Service. So this is really learning, is this really an address that I want to be mailing to, even though it appears to be good, and or, it's just providing additional data, especially with the idea of utilizing that in conjunction with a lot of the USPS existing tools, because there are certain flags where we talked about the 1.7% that of addresses that were deficient. It's like, okay, well, if it's deficient, that means the carrier is going to have to try and figure out where should they deliver it. They'll be able to figure some of those out. Some of them they won't. By utilizing some post mailing data, this additional data that we have, we can identify some of the ones that go, no, this one's deficient, and we know that past attempts to send something using that name and address and information was unsuccessful. So don't use it.
We definitely have some more questions. I'm going to work through this one. Are there plans to charge mailers for using bad addresses at full rate? These are addresses that cannot be updated for legal reasons. That's the question.
Well, my answer to that would be they're not plans. Those are the current regulations in most cases. As you look at it, that and this is where your particular situation and your industry may have some minor differences, and there's some different scenarios within the post office's regulatory scheme that speak to this. But in general, you should not be claiming a postage discount on a piece that does not CAS DPV confirm and hasn't had an NCOA run on it and applied recently. You can run CAS and NCOA all day long, but unless you apply those changes to your address, you broadly should not be claiming discounts on those pieces. And I'm going to let Adam talk to you at least a couple of the scenarios that people might run into.
And it actually is kind of a good question, and it relates back to Cycle O, and it's true. It's not really a change in regulation. Addresses that are good, qualified, and deliverable are the ones that are to get discounts. Those that do not meet that criteria should not get discounts. In CAS Cycle O, some of the changes that are coming are simply better identifying some of the nuanced scenarios. So there are a few records that today, with today's CAS Cycle, currently fail to code and you don't get discount. Yet turns out they're deliverable. That scenario was identified. There's a new CAS regulation going in to handle those particular ones. So in the new CAS cycle, those will now fully CAS code and you'll get your discounts and all's happy. However, there is a bigger grouping of addresses, the ones I mentioned, where today you qualify for discounts, yet this address is not deliverable by the Postal Service. So with Cycle O, those addresses will no longer CAS code to the point of getting a ZIP+4, so therefore they will no longer qualify for postage discounts. So it's not so much the conceptual rule hasn't changed. Good addresses get discounts, bad addresses, bad non-deliverable addresses don't. With CAS Cycle O, it's just clarifying, which addresses fall into which of those two categories. But again, these are the ones that you can take action on today to identify those. And also, because especially if you have to get both physical addresses where a person lives and where they get mail, you will have physical addresses that are not valid for mail delivery. And by this, it could easily be, well, I've seen some customers where over 0.5% of the records in their database fell into that category. Yes, this is where they live. No, it is not where they receive their mail. And there's a number of different scenarios as to why that falls into play. And the key thing there is that's fine. You're going to have those in your database. Let's just make sure they're in your database correctly, so that that address is not utilized in any of your mailing jobs. That's one of the other advantages of using just in time on the actual pieces that are being mailed. It allows us to evaluate which records are being pulled and identify the accounts where, nope, you're pulling the wrong ones. You're pulling a non-physical address. You need to be pulling the other address information you have for that person.
Yeah, and as we talk a little bit more into this area, you're going to run into customers, and it's not necessarily a customer, but you're going to see particular mailing lists or mailing cohorts that The answer is we can't change the address because of XYZ. It might be state insurance regulations. It may be an interpretation by the customer's legal department. And we understand those, right? Those exist, and that's why you want to work at your address verification at the very start of your process, right? To ensure that you have the fewest number of deficient addresses in your system. The other part of that, and as if you're a vendor or a mailer on behalf of someone else, you may not be able to do much about those particular addresses other than make them aware and help them clearly understand the impact of those addresses, both from a regulatory impact and a customer experience impact. The other thing to think about, and this is a conversation we have with folks both internal and then internal to the operations, but then at a higher level from a business standpoint, is if you continue to mail to a bad address that you know is bad for legal reasons, there are questions about compliance as well, right? And in an insurance industry, you may be forced to mail to a bad address. You got to send your notices to that address. But as you start to get into some like HIPAA compliance and other things, if you continue to mail to a bad address, there's just as much risk in mailing to that bad address or that address where the customer is no longer there in terms of exposing information that you may not want to, right? So there are some compliance and risk elements, even if the requirement in one case is to mail to the customer's address, or at least to notify them at that address. You have to understand what risks am I putting in place if I don't use that information and I don't leverage that information to make changes in the way I communicate with my customer. So it's a balancing act, and there's many different forces at play that are going on, and you have to understand those. And that's where you have to have conversations, not just in an operational standpoint, but have conversations with the line of businesses, the experts in that particular, whether it's auto lending or finance or insurance or credit cards, whatever it may be, those particular groups, and probably have conversations with your legal representation about the best ways to handle those. And we're happy to bring postal insight and to understand the impacts both from a rate perspective, like your postage costs, and the impacts from the amount of mail that'll reach your customers and successfully achieve your goals. So we can help handle both sides and speak some data into that to understand the risks on both sides of the equation.
And that was an interesting example I was thinking about as well. Like I said, it's a balancing act. There's the postal regulations, and then there's your own business and industry regulations, and especially when there's regulations that involve risk of penalties back to your particular business, and how to utilize the data, not just necessarily to decide what to mail and what not to mail, but to decide what maybe to mail. Identify the ones that look to be higher risk, so you modify what is being mailed out. And it's not just for first class mail. This happens with marketing mail as well. You can identify pieces that are likely to have an issue with delivery if you send it out to Everette Mills at his address. But if you can identify it, you can potentially modify the piece or modify the addressing to where the piece is no longer specifically necessarily targeted to Everette, but to whoever is residing at that address. So you can actually get more pieces delivered and potentially get higher response rates on your mailing operations. So it's a ways of identifying, using the data quality to make better business decisions to improve the deliverability of your mail and the safety of the data of what you're communicating. Next question. I like these. These are good ones.
Well, Adam, I think we're gonna have to take the rest of the questions offline. We're getting to the end of the hour. So, and again, unless somebody has any more questions, I think that's imperative. I think we can leave that for post event. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to respond to any of the emails with the content we're going to send out in the next couple days. In the meantime, I'd like to thank Everett and Adam for their time today, for going through this topic, and thank everybody for attending. And hopefully in the next couple days, you will receive a copy of this along with the PowerPoint and some other materials we know that will help you understand. Thank you much, everybody. Have a great day.